the world of India and China. And we have author of the book, Mr. Shastri Ramachandran, who needs no introduction. He is a veteran journalist, written several books, monographs, and he has been senior editor in China. He has been editor of different publications in India. So welcome, and we also, and in conversation with him, we have Mr. Sandeep D. Sandeep D. is another senior journalist who has been covering foreign affairs for I think 2-3 decades, if I am not mistaken. Currently, he is the associate editor with the Tribune Daily, and we have read him in the Hindu and other places. We have been reading, at least as far as I am concerned, I have been reading him for last 15 years or so. So welcome, but to formally welcome both the speakers and all of you, I would request the President of the Press Club of India, Mr. Gautam Lahiri, to come and welcome our guests.
Very good evening. Thank you for coming here. I have been following Shastri Ramachandran when he started almost journalism in Delhi. I am not from Delhi. I have come over here in the late 80s. But I also covered along with Sandeep the foreign affairs. But here I don't want to say much because I want to listen to what the book is all about. Particularly very interesting subject I found, that the Beyond Binaries, and especially when the two Asian giants are competing with each other, what would be the future course of action? Perhaps there will be some guidelines or some direction you have mentioned. I am told for the previous discussion what you had in other places. So I have a limited knowledge of your book. I will try to read it, and I will request all of you to read it. Those who are interested about India-China relations, which is no doubt is a very hot topic so far as the foreign affairs is concerned. Thank you very much for coming here. Once again, now I will hand over it to Sandeep. Sandeep is my colleague. He was not only a journalist, he also a former Secretary General of the club. So that was just mentioned. Thank you.
Good evening. I would say that I am humbled by being asked to quarterback a discussion on the book Beyond Binaries. This is not just because Shastri Ramachandran is very erudite, but because there are two people in the audience, Narayan Lakshman and Saibal Chatterjee, who also lived in China and have also written something. Anand Krishnan and Saibal Chatterjee, who've written brilliant books on China, who also lived there. So it's very seldom that in a hall like this, we have three authors who have lived in China and written on China. And perhaps one day we might think of having a discussion with all the three of them, so that we can ask perhaps more, probing more incisive questions. But for now, this is Beyond Binaries, the World of China, India and China, by Shastri Ramachandran. And when I went through the forewords, I found that quite a few diplomats had been very restrained in writing about the book. So there could be two reasons. Perhaps either they did not read it, or perhaps they found that when they had written the books, they had many limitations that Shastri did not have. And so perhaps the best one has come from someone who knows China very well, Dr. Alka Acharya, who said Shastri Ramachandran does not merely move beyond binaries. He stretches out for the reader a China canvas, finely granular, filled with astute observations, vivid snapshots, and often startling information. And startling information also I did find. But first of all, in the intro, Shyam Saran has used the word bricolage. I would like to know what that word means, and if you could start off with that.
It's
it's very interesting that I was also better because it's a little far and the sound will carry better. Actually, it's such a remarkable coincidence that you should bring up this word bricolage or bricolage as pronounced in two ways, like most English words, because Dr. Manzoor Alam, who is the chairman of the Institute of Objective Studies, is a very distinguished scholar of Islamic studies as well as economics, and was a professor of economics, and he was also economic advisor to the government of Saudi Arabia. So he was very ill and undergoing periodic hospitalization in and out. So he said no, but he will read the full manuscript, and I asked him, will you write a publisher's note? He said, I think I will have to write for this book, but I will read it and then decide. When I saw that word bricolage in the book, then I knew that he has written every word of it himself, because there are few of our generation who would use this word. The bricolage means disparate collection. But you will be surprised. So when I mentioned this to my son, that this bricolage is a giveaway, that he himself has made the effort to write it, he said, no, this word is used a lot in design and art, So, otherwise the word was used, I think, when one refers to disparate writing that have been brought together. Not exactly, little more than a melting pot where not everything binds.
Yeah, and to put it in context, this is a book that writes about the period, a 14-year period between 2008 and 2022. And in that 14-year period, we saw a huge number of ups and downs. The down, as everyone is aware of, and 2008, when Shastri Ramachandran picks up the story with his first visit to China, we see improvement in bilateral. We see an improvement in bilateral ties. We see an improvement in bilateral ties with the focus squarely on economic. And then that continued with the Modi era also. The first 2 years, as you say, the first 2 years were a continuation of the Manmohan era. And then things started going downhill. And you've also mentioned the Sushma Swaraj episode over there,
Yes.
where the Chinese state media called her a liar.
Yeah.
And NSA Ajit Doval also said something.
Yes.
So that means that things had started souring in 2016.
Yes.
Now, would you go back to that period and tell us now how do you see, why do you think the souring began, and why do you think the policymakers couldn't get a handle on it at that time?
You are a very, very perceptive reader. First, even what you chose to read. You are very right. I was also struck by the response of all the people who have written the blurbs, which is quite exceptional. Because it really took me by surprise. Then one or two of them said, no, you said things in this book which ought to have been made public, but for some reason it was not made public at that time. So that's a very important thing. And almost all of them were so gracious. They said, we've written this. Whatever you want to change, you are not comfortable with, please delete it, do whatever you want, if you wish. And I think none of them have been untruthful. Like when Lalit Man Singh says that that what I have written, it is at variance with all the China, the views of most experts on China. It's because I have spent time there. I think it says a lot that he doesn't say whether he agrees with it or not, but he says that this is set off against the views of men who view China, study China, so whatever it is. Coming to this thing of why things started going sour, actually I am terrified of saying anything because there are two greater China hands here, One is Saibal Das Gupta, who is actually the dean of the press corps when we were there, in Beijing. And Ananda Krishnan, deceptively young man, but I think I've always held him to be India's finest foreign correspondent. Truly exceptional in understanding and writing. So, but I will say what I have to say because if I'm wrong, I'm glad they will correct me. But my feeling is that there were similarities to the way China was being treated at that time. I think it began soon after this, earlier, from that anniversary of the 1962 war in 2012 itself. But during Manmohan's time, nobody got a purchase on the issue, you know. And I think while the US was happy with the government on many other fronts, and they were doing their own infrastructure building and all in the border, they did not seriously expect any confrontation, and perhaps they sensed that that would not happen under the UPA regime because of the kind of relationship that was there. But after that, I think personally, it is not so much as Modi himself who wanted to this thing. Because if you look at the general approach of Modi to international relations, it is that, okay, I can go make friends with everybody, I hug everybody, nobody is my enemy, I am not hostile to anybody, I am friends with everybody, I have such. So, if you look at it from that viewpoint, even the way he kind of, day in and day out, Pakistan is equated with the very definition of an enemy and everything. He goes to Pakistan on Vajpayee's birthday and then Nawaz Sharif. So, I think that India is a free country in many senses, and there are powerful forces within the establishment which are working for and against China. And that is one. Second, I think the military, especially the arms lobby worldwide, and there are powerful Western interests which would not like to see any kind of reconciliation between India and China. And this is not something new that I have discovered, but it has been spelled out very well in Kishore Mehruwani's book, and when he came here also, he said, long before we came to this stage, that the main battle of the 21st century will be which of the two of these three of India, China and US will come together. So I think there is always a push from the West the moment it looks like there might be any conversation. And this is not very obvious to the general public. But for instance, whether it is Saibal or you are following foreign affairs or Anand would know, if there is some back channel talk taking place, then you can be sure that around that same period there will be satellite photographs of structures coming up in Bhutan and so on. And so often correspondents tend to pay attention to that. For example, even recently, for about 15 months or 16 months now, since last October, 22nd October, there is no Chinese ambassador in India. And this is just happened that relationship is bad, they have not gone through the process. But they had already named their ambassador. And that is when there was a kind of a track to talks deep in the background taking place. So when I mentioned it, they said no, but right now these new structures are again coming up in Bhutan and things like that. So I think this is how it is played. First. Second, I think there is also somewhere a slight disconnect between the NSA and the ME. It may not have been there during the time of Shankar Menon, because he was foreign secretary, soon after that he was NSA. And a lot of the forward movement in the relationship, all round, was when he was both foreign secretary and the national security advisor. And M.K. Narayan did perhaps, he said what Prime Minister Manmohan Singh wanted, and he took care to see that no feathers were ruffled. But after that, I think it is not even so much Ajit Doval who was there. But it is, I think, there were sections in the MEA which started. Like for instance, I read certain journals, I can name them also because it's all in the public. Like we look at Ramachandran, and there is a particular school of thought which is constantly kind of pushing that you should go for a war with China, you have to teach them a lesson. So I think some of these things, much like the forward policy during Nehru's time, this constant taunting of China, that we will teach them a lesson. You use these crude words like la lang dikhana, this kind of thing. And as Shankar Menon said during the 60th anniversary, I mentioned that in the book also, at the ORF, so a full house. And he said that in China nobody seems to be bothered about it. He said, I don't remember even if I read one article, whereas here they are full of outpourings. And sometimes it is hard to distinguish fact from fiction and whether what we have conjured up how much it conforms to the reality of the situation. And in the case of Sushma Swaraj, I think the Chinese saying what they did calling her, I think it was after that hour, they basically wanted to say that we can't work like this, that you go hammer and tongs at us, criticizing all the time, and not just criticizing but berating, showing contempt, and then you turn on the charm and smile and you think we should fall for your overture. So you cannot expect that. But I was quite surprised at their use of the term liar, because the Chinese are extremely polite. Their language is unfailingly courteous and polite. And if they put a stiletto to your neck, you still be nodding your head when your head falls off. It's extremely polite. You would not know. So that I was very surprised when they use that word.
I'll touch upon 2 or 3 things that you briefly mentioned. One is India and China having an Asian century. You said this is a chimera.
Yes.
It cannot happen. Second is PM Modi's over-reliance on personal chemistry, which you say personal chemistry does not work with China.
Yes.
And third is you have also provided some way out. For instance, India and China can combine in many areas, and you mentioned pharma as one. So taking all these 3 together, would like to hear what you've written in the book and what you think about it.
So first thing, the Asian century is a chimera, but it's a chimera because I don't see how it can come about, given this is going to take a long time. You need a change of political conditions, you need a change of political leadership who will talk to each other, and then you have to create a political climate. Because here what is happening is that it's a very unfortunate thing. But unfortunately sometimes it looks in India like foreign policy is run by the trolls on social media. I mean, somebody writes, 70 crore Indians, they are against Maldives. Do 70 crore Indians even know where is Maldives and what is happening? So, similarly, we have this kind of outburst against China. I remember once when I was writing a column for an English newspaper, fairly well regarded, and it was ranked as the 6th newspaper that is for DNA, which I said the Mandarin speaking point. So somebody has written an online comment, this man speaks Chinese, how can we trust him as India's foreign secretary? You look at this. Whereas you look at US, when Timothy Geithner is ambassador to China, they take pride in the fact that he's a Mandarin speaking person. And every year they have an economic and strategic dialogue. And every year when he goes for that dialogue, they will again remind people that he is a Chinese speaking. So it's very different how they approach China and how we approach China. Probably 2 great civilizations staying at this, and there are more issues between them than beyond them, kind of. So I say it is a chimera because I also learned a lot from people. I was invited to a conclave, a closed-door meeting in Manipal, which Pranab Mukherjee addressed as foreign minister, and where he followed up on Manmohan Singh speaking of 2 tigers. It was not a public speech where you will get tough company. Manmohan Singh said that after the summit of Benjiao at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. I don't think we have a comparable institution in India to this. But one would say something like the Council on Foreign Relations in the US, which is not so widely based as CAS. So it is there that he spoke of the Asian century. And I think it was a very well-advised and research kind of input for SP. Later, Pranab Mukherjee elaborated on this at Manipal. And I was very surprised when Pranab Mukherjee came to Manipal. What struck me, he said, no, this is my first visit in Manipal. So I said, someone who has been finance minister for so many years in government, he has not come to the one city in India which has produced more banks than any other city probably in the world. So I said, what is, and then his advisors, including security advisors, China advisors, they had kept a speech prepared for him because they said he's been traveling for the last 2 days, he might not have had time to prepare anything. He was very gracious, he took it, but he didn't use any of the points. And he made a simple point that you cannot have an Asian century unless you address disparities within Asia first. And he pointed out, it was very, he said like you have the poor quarters of ASEAN, like Laos and Cambodia, and he said even Vietnam is falling into that post-socialism phase, which has got diluted and everything. And then he said when we say ASEAN, we think of, the clash in Singapore and Malaysia and Bangkok. He said no, but the real ASEAN is somewhere else. And he has made this point in more than one place. And I think other people close to Manmohan Singh have also made this point. So it is a chimera because these two countries are not recognizing that. Also, there was a very, very interesting meeting of the equivalent of the Planning Commission. I think it's called China's Reform and Development Commission. So I was there for one meeting where Amartya Sen, Martha Nussbaum and Joseph Stiglitz, three of them were there. And it's not a coincidence, I think, that these three Nobel Prize winners for economics have also been deeply involved with India and India's development. And I think they engaged a lot with Manmohan Singh. And perhaps it's the first time in our time that we had a Prime Minister who engaged with them so deeply. And they also said that there is so much scope for India and China to come together, because they said we have much to learn from each other in terms of poverty alleviation. So unless they attend to poverty alleviation, and they said that extreme poverty in China is very little, but it might be able to kind of get over it in the short term, whereas India we don't even have the required data for coming to any conclusion. And that was before the present government came in, and that time they were down about data. The second thing is that this is once they get over this, only then can they look at any kind of economic partnership. Then of course this whole cultural thing was there, that China doesn't believe that there can be only one tiger on a mountain, whereas Manmohan Singh says there can be two tigers. So that is why I say it is a chimera, and I say it is a chimera only post-Galwan, post-2016. Before that I would not have said it's a chimera. The second thing I have said, you mentioned was about, one was about pharma. No, I acquainted myself with hospitals in China and things like that. I had reasons to, professional and otherwise. And
if you can touch on traditional medicine and Ayurveda also.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because you have quacks in China also. That is another common thing. In both countries, poor people are kind of victims of quacks. So you also find them kind of surface in China. And I don't want to give names because Supreme Court has also named the person, who is known to all of us.
You have also named that.
I have also named, yes. But I have named him in a very positive way, and how he has inspired quacks in China. So, now, if you, like when I was there, okay, it's not a big secret, I had a heart attack in China. So you get this statin, and you get these Pfizer tablets or something. Each of them is $1.50. You are getting statin at that time in India, and vaccines for 1 rupee, I think, or 10 rupees, I don't know, something like that. So there is great kind of potential for pharma cooperation. Then you will find these hospitals in China. One is they have traditional Chinese medicine. Of course, there's an esoteric debate there whether there is something called traditional Chinese medicine or not. Like here also there are people who say what is homeopathy, just sugar and maida or whatever it might be, balls. So, but if you look at the infrastructure of Chinese hospitals is really extraordinary. And there are people of various nationalities working there. And it has been created by two. And I don't think even I only wrote about it once in a column, but only a few people would know that more than once UN Secretary Generals have said that Cuba is the healthcare superpower of the world. It's really an extraordinary thing, and Indians know so little about it. Although we have many admirers of Castro in this country, including non-communists who are admirers of Castro. And I followed this thing of a lot of events in Cuba. And when Ebola broke out, we all remember there's a huge story on the front page of Indian newspapers from New York Times, how a doctor who contracted Ebola was being flown back in a plane. And people that say American takes a good care of their doctors. But it's a surprising thing when I looked at the facts. The largest contingent of doctors who were treating people for Ebola was not from US, not from UK, not from any of the developed countries. the largest contingent of 250 doctors were from Cuba. And all the other countries put together was not even 120. And then after this happened, somebody interviewed one of the Cuban doctors and asked him, so what do you do when one of your doctors or health workers get Ebola? They said, no, we give them the same treatment in Africa that we give the Africans. So you can see the philosophy. So this is the philosophy that Cubans have brought to the building of hospitals. And almost all hospitals, I'm sure there are hospitals for the privileged people in their compound and all that, but almost all hospitals, specialities, they are open to all. And there is a huge difference. You can pay 5-star rates. Probably, but if you pay 5-star rates also, I think you get your money's worth in China, which you don't get here. So it's quite, there is a scope for, in the sense, if you remember the fact that India has perhaps the largest population in the world, which is left to the mercy of the private sector for healthcare. When you consider that and what is happening in China, like China, if you go to a Chinese hospital, then you don't want international treatment, like there's an international hospital, China, Japan thing, or Peking Union Hospital, where the charges might be very much higher. But the same hospital will have a flow where you can get the same treatment for 110 or 120 about that. That is the second thing. The third thing you mentioned on the foundation, this thing, then pharma, and one other point. You will come to it now.
And if we can also come to the peripherals, you have spoken about international organizations in which China was a member. Then there's this very interesting couple of pieces by you where you said that India needn't have tried so much to get into energy. And then there is a place where you hint that perhaps our sweetness towards Bangladesh was accentuated by a Chinese VIP trip to Bangladesh in 2016. That India's sweetness towards Bangladesh got accentuated because of a 2016 visit to Bangladesh by Xi Jinping, was it?
Yeah.
By Xi Jinping.
Yes.
And that actually...
No, actually he went to Bangladesh and then came to the BRICS summit in Goa. Yes.
So you've spoken about BRICS, SARC, BIMSTEC, SCO, and of course RIC. So which of these organizations, which organization do you think has the most potential to really accomplish maybe half of its mandate? Considering the India-China tension, considering the India-Pakistan tension?
No, that reminds me, what was your other question? That is about personalizing of relationships between, like personalizing of relationship doesn't work in China. Generally that is, or with any state, because all governments deal with each other for reasons of state. There might have been an element of personalization in India-Russia relationship, or in India's relationship with the Arab world. For instance, till Saddam Hussein perished under the onslaught of the US attack, there were written orders that all infrastructure and development contracts should be given to India. Many people attributed it to Indira Gandhi's kind of the regard they have for us. So it was that kind of thing. Now, why I mentioned that was, I pointed it out specifically to say how the Chinese media is being misread in India, that people are not able to read it correctly. I might have, well, quite possible that I read it. Like when I was there, see what happens is, there is a fount of news and opinion. Like I have said in my chapter on think tanks, there will be a, I don't know whether it's a brainstorming or one person decides or two people decide, okay, we need to, now this so and so is coming, such and such a foreign policy will be discussed, and this is the broad line. So we need saturation coverage. So over the next 1 week, 10 days or 15 days, you will find Xinhua, China Daily, Global Times, there are People's Daily, or PLA, all of them will take up and write about it in different ways, articles, editorials, reports, and interviews and so on, find personalities and so on. So, when the SCO meeting was going on, and that was the time that the nuclear suppliers group, India was very frantic to get into the NSC, nuclear suppliers group, and it did not appear to be succeeding. It was being treated as I have said in my book, that this is a case of two bilateralisms. that okay, we are friends with US. US says India should be a member of NSC, so we should become a member. And then it is one country, China, which is opposed. Now, so this was a kind of a fabrication. They first started speaking, then they also began believing it. For a simple reason, nobody pointed out, and we should have pointed out more than once, and I have pointed out. First, we have to understand that the nuclear supplier group was set up by the United States after India's first nuclear test. And why was it set up? It was set up exclusively for the purpose of keeping India out of the loop of supplies, uranium supplies. So, and they had even stopped heavy water and all that to India. I remember that because I had gone to all the heavy water plants, the journals had been taken on a press tour. So when this had happened, so then they said, why is China stopping? And in my reading, all international organizations, whether it is the UN Security Council or NSC, if in a house you find there are 5 people or 10 people, if 2 people are opposing it, I can confidently say, no, they must be admitted, because I am confident that those 2 will never come around to agree. But the moment they come around, then I will raise other issues. Like it happened sometime, I think in the late 90s, when it looked like there might be UN reforms. Then what happened? So everybody said, oh, the attempt, the UN Security Council, one of the ideas behind the way the security is to keep out those who lost during World War. So then they said, but if Germany is going to be considered, then why should Italy be left out? You will remember this debate was also. So the moment it looks like getting resolved, then Europe raises the prospect of 2 members. There will be not 2, then it will be 4, because it's UK, France, Germany and Italy, or Germany or Italy. Whereas the whole of South America doesn't get any. So, but they were sure it would not happen. So similarly this time, at that time, Prime Minister Modi had gone on a visit, if I remember, several countries. He'd gone to Switzerland, he'd gone to Ireland, he'd gone to Mexico. And many of these countries he went to and raised the issue of energy was raised. We don't know if it was raised by him or during talks between the officials. I think it would have been more likely between the officials. The Prime Minister would not normally raise an issue on which he is likely to say. That's so one assumes. But then, every time he came back, I spoke to the JF or whoever gave an off-the-record briefing. They said, no, all these countries saying this publicly, officially none of them are supporting. Okay. So then what happens after that? There is an SCO. And then China Daily says, they announced that Prime Minister Modi will meet Xi Jinping and that will break the impasse and India will just sail through to membership of it. The moment it was put out like this, maybe less crudely in Indian newspapers and media, the Chinese newspapers and media started blaring out that no purpose will be served by Prime Minister Modi travelling to, I think it was in Uzbekistan or something, to meet President Xi Jinping. So you have China Daily saying that, you have Global Times saying that, you have CCTV saying that. So my reading of it is, the official media is telling India's officialdom, please do not embarrass yourself, do not embarrass your Prime Minister, because no headway would be possible. So, but apparently they didn't. The faith, it's almost like we believe, what we believe about the Ram temple, firm belief that Modi ji goes, things will just happen, It did not happen. And then we had the spectacle of the NSG meeting. It was held in Seoul, Korea, one meeting. And before that, it reminded me of college union elections, where the foreign secretary is going to Beijing from Tashkent, so that he was in Tashkent, he goes to Beijing. Then he is there in Seoul and Korea to see whether they are going to get elected to the NSG. Since when does a foreign secretary go and wait to see how the votes fall? You just stand back. I remember when India had contested long years ago in '89 for the judgeship in the International Court of Justice, and the MEA had just kept the phone line open. They told the embassy that this line will be open from the time the voting starts till the counting is over. There was nothing visible at all about India's anxiety. So it could have been handled differently, and our foreign minister now, foreign secretary, is a very sophisticated person, ferocious intellect. I was really surprised that this is how the optics of foreign policy was. Because, and it was not one country, there were at least at any given time 3, 4, 5 countries that did not favor India's membership of the NSC. So, this is why I said the only exception one time I saw, and I think Saibal was also there, Anand was also there, is when Shiv Shankar Menon had come for the, I don't remember if it was for the special representative, but he had come on a visit to China. So we asked him who all did he meet. So he said he had only 3 meetings. He said he had a meeting with President Xi Jinping, he had a meeting with Dai Bungo, who was a special representative, and maybe the state foreign minister or prime minister. Then I think 1 or 2 of us went and spoke to his director, whoever had come with him. But his appointment list had a number of people, about 14 people. So they said, Shiv Shankar Menon, China sees differently. There is an element of the personal when it comes, you know. But I think there are also traditional reasons for it. Because Shiv Shankar Menon is an exceptional phenomenon. In so far as dealing with China is concerned, not except in terms of what I am not saying there. Because his grandfather was ambassador to China and foreign secretary. His uncle was foreign secretary and ambassador to China. His father-in-law was also ambassador to China, was foreign secretary, and he was also, I think, the last Indian consul general in what was East Turkestan, which is now Xinjiang. And one more very interesting fact which I gathered later, that is R.V. Sathe, his father-in-law. He was also a very young IFS recruit, fresh on the job. When Nehru put him on, when the foreign secretary put him on the job of burning all the documents which showed the map in favor of China, and he said he wants every one of them burned. And this is there in A.G. Nurani's book, and it's a very young foreign service officer he has put. So I inquired who it was, and they said it was R.P. Sathe. So it is because of what? And this book and this detailed survey which Shiv Shankar Menon was the NSA. So it is hard to believe that he was not in the know. So that is why I said Shiv Shankar Menon is a slight exception.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the book also, how
Yes,
it
yes.
Shiv Shankar Menon a bit differently.
Yeah, so all these organizations now, which you ask which is the most, forget NSG, RIC is not functional now because India doesn't, in the present circumstances, want to see itself as being caught with Russia and China both, given the international situation. Then SCOB does not know where it is going because now SCO will also change course because one of the main biggest players in the SCO are the Central Asian republics. And when I traveled to Xinjiang and I also went to Kazakhstan, my sense of it is first, there is a lot of need for economic development in Xinjiang and also these places. And there was a trickle of these jihadis and all these ISIS people kind of trickling into Central Asia. So it was China and Russia trying to lock Central Asia into a security arrangement and providing some economic boost to it. So it was that. And I don't see how India can, because on almost all my trips to China, there were people from Central Asia. So one could see that both Russia and China are competing to win their affection.